He came home early, a billionaire stepping into silence. But halfway through the marble hallway, he froze. From the living room came the sound of whispering prayer. And when he looked inside, he saw something that hit harder than any loss, any deal, any fortune he'd ever made. His three children, kneeling on the floor, hands joined, eyes closed, while the black maid he'd barely noticed stood before them, praying softly for him. That moment didn't just stop his breath. It shattered everything he thought he knew about love, faith, and what it meant to be rich. It was almost midnight when Marcus Halden's jet touched down. The rain was pounding so hard the driver had to jog through puddles just to open the door. Marcus didn't wait. He grabbed his briefcase, stepped out, and walked straight toward the mansion, the glow of motion lights bouncing off his drenched suit. He'd spent the last week closing a deal worth $500 million, yet he'd never felt emptier. The gate swung open, and the sound of silence met him. No voices, no laughter, just that hollow stillness that had filled the place ever since his wife, Lauren, died 3 years ago. He used to love coming home. Now it just reminded him of everything money couldn't buy back. He let himself in quietly, setting the briefcase on the marble table. The smell of lavender cleaner hung in the air. He was halfway to the stairs when something stopped him. A soft murmur, faint but steady, coming from down the hall. At first, he thought maybe one of the kids left the TV on. But as he followed the sound, he realized it wasn't a movie or song. It was voices, real voices, calm, rhythmic, praying. He turned the corner and froze. There, in the middle of the living room, his three kids, 12-year-old Sophie, 10-year-old Emily, and little Lucas, 8, were kneeling on the carpet, heads bowed, hands joined. And leading them was Maria, the maid he'd hired just 2 months earlier. Maria was a black woman in her 30s with quiet strength in her eyes and a softness that made people feel safe. She wore a plain house uniform and a worn cross around her neck. Her voice was steady and full of warmth as she prayed, "Lord, bless this home. Keep Mr. Halden safe on his travels. Let these children always feel your love, even when they're lonely." Marcus's throat tightened. He hadn't heard anyone pray in this house since Lauren's funeral. The memory hit him like a flood, her hand in his, her whisper at night, "Don't forget to pray with them when I'm gone." But he had. When the prayer ended, Lucas spotted him and shouted, "Dad." The other two jumped up and ran to him. Marcus tried to smile, wiping his face. Hey, what's all this?" "Midnight church." Maria stood quickly, flustered. "I'm sorry, sir. The kids asked me about prayer." "I didn't mean to," he stopped her. "No, it's fine. I just wasn't expecting it." But inside, he was shaken. That night, he couldn't sleep. He sat in his dark study, staring at the old photo of his family. Lauren holding Lucas on her hip, the girls smiling, and him behind them, looking like he actually lived in that world. He hadn't realized until tonight just how far he'd drifted from it. The next morning, he walked into the kitchen and saw something he hadn't seen in years. His kids sitting together eating breakfast, talking, laughing. And Maria, flipping pancakes like she'd been there forever. "Morning, Mr. Halden," she said with a polite smile. "Morning," he said, watching how effortlessly she made them feel normal. For the first time in a long while, he sat down at the table with them. Emily poured him orange juice like it was the most natural thing in the world. "Maria says you used to tell Mom you were going to build a rocket," Lucas said between bites. Marcus blinked. "She told you that?" Maria chuckled softly. "Your daughter found the model in the storage room. She asked me what it was." He smiled, shaking his head. That model rocket was from college. Lauren used to tease him about it. From that morning on, things started to shift. He came home earlier. Sometimes he'd find Maria teaching the kids how to bake or helping them with homework. Sometimes they'd all be outside in the garden planting tomatoes. One Friday night, he walked in and found them dancing to old Motown songs in the kitchen. The kids were barefoot, Maria holding the spatula like a microphone, spinning them around. For the first time in years, Marcus laughed until his stomach hurt. "Didn't know I hired a dance instructor," he teased. Maria blushed. "Sorry, sir. Music makes chores go faster." "Nah," he said, smiling. "Don't apologize. This house needed that." Later that week, he passed by the kids' room and overheard Maria reading to them from a worn-out Bible, not preaching, just telling stories, explaining kindness, forgiveness, gratitude, things he'd stopped teaching after Lauren died. That night, he called her into his office. Maria, he said quietly, you've done something to this house. To them. I don't even know how to thank you. She shrugged. It's not me, sir. Kids just need to feel seen. When people feel love, they bloom. He nodded, speechless. Months went by. The house transformed. The laughter returned. Marcus began praying with them before bed, awkward at first, but honest. He started remembering birthdays, cooking breakfast, tucking the kids in. He was finally becoming a father again. Then, one afternoon, Maria got a call. Her hands shook as she answered. Her son, David, had been accepted into Yale, the dream she'd worked for all her life. But her face fell as she hung up. Tuition was impossible. That evening, Marcus overheard her in the pantry, whispering into the phone, Baby, don't worry about the money. Mom'll figure it out. God didn't bring us this far to leave us now. When she came out, her eyes were wet, but she smiled anyway. The next morning, she found an envelope on the kitchen counter with her name written neatly on it. She opened it and gasped. A check, full tuition, signed by Marcus. Mr. Halden, I can't, he interrupted. You can. You've given me something priceless, Maria. You gave my kids their childhood back. You gave me my heart back. Let me do this for you. Her voice broke. Sir, you don't know what this means to me. I do, he said softly. Because you showed me what faith means. That fall, her son left for Yale. The whole family drove her to the airport to see him off. Lucas cried when she hugged him goodbye. Marcus stood beside her, feeling something he hadn't in years, pride. Not the kind that comes from money, but from connection. Months later, she started visiting every Sunday. The kids called her Aunt Maria. They cooked, played, prayed. And Marcus, he started joining her at church sometimes, quietly in the back row, no cameras, no assistants, just a man relearning gratitude. One evening, Marcus stood on the balcony with a cup of coffee, watching the sunset bleed over the hills. The kids were chasing each other in the yard. Maria sat nearby, humming an old hymn, smiling. He whispered under his breath, Lauren, you'd love her. For a long time, he just stood there, the billionaire who finally understood that peace doesn't come from money or deals or power. It comes from the people who walk into your life at the exact moment your soul needs saving. And when people later asked him what changed him, what made him different, he'd just smile and say, A maid started praying with my kids one night. And somehow, she taught me how to live again. If that story moved you, if it made you feel something, hit that like button and subscribe to Black Visionaries. Because sometimes the richest stories aren't about wealth. They're about grace, faith, and the people who remind us what home really means.